My daughter-in-law posted a video online saying, "That old woman just sits on her ass all day," and laughed like she'd told the funniest joke in the world. People filled her comment section with laughing emojis and praise for her honesty. I just sat there, staring at the phone screen, my hand frozen around a cup of coffee I suddenly didn't want anymore. It wasn't the words that hurt the most. It was the ease with which she said them, like mocking me was as casual as breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply closed the app, took a slow breath, and decided that if this was the game she wanted to play, Karma and I were going to be her opponents. What she didn't realize was that the woman she called lazy was the same one who'd built the very life she was living so comfortably in. She'd just forgotten who she was dealing with, but she was about to remember. It had started like any other afternoon. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the apple pie I'd baked earlier for my grandson Liam. I had just finished washing the breakfast dishes they'd left in the sink when my neighbor's granddaughter, Ella, sent me a message. "Is this you?" Attached was a link to TikTok. I opened it not expecting much until I saw my own kitchen on the screen. My heart skipped. The camera shook slightly, panning across the spotless counters I'd just polished, the sunlight pouring in through the window, and there I was, sitting at the table with my reading glasses on, folding laundry. Haley's voice narrated over the click, cheerful and cruel at the same time. "You know it's wild," she said. "My MOL lives with us rent-free. She's home all day, and look what she does. Nothing. Just sits there like royalty." She zoomed in on me right when I reached for another towel to fold. I looked small, unaware. The caption read, "When she says she's too tired to cook, but this is her daily schedule." The sound of my own voice caught in my throat. I hadn't even realized I'd gasped out loud until the coffee cup rattled on the table. The comments started pouring in faster than I could read. "Old people these days? Kick her out. She probably expects a medal for existing." Each one felt like a slap, and with every cruel remark, I could almost hear her laughter echoing down the hallway. My hands began to tremble as I scrolled through the sea of strangers mocking me, my name, my worth, my existence. 68 years of life, of work, of raising a son alone after his father died. And this was what I'd become to the world. A lazy punchline, a joke for social media clout. I sat there for what felt like hours, frozen between disbelief and heartbreak. It wasn't just that she'd filmed me without permission, it was the betrayal behind it. Haley wasn't just my daughter-in-law, she was someone I had cared for, defended, and welcomed like my own daughter. When she first moved in, she'd lost her job and cried at the kitchen table, terrified about money. I'd held her hand and told her, "This house is yours too, your family now." And now the same woman I once comforted was the one turning my kindness into a meme. I looked around the kitchen, the spotless counters, the flowers I'd arranged that morning, and everything suddenly felt strange, unfamiliar, like I was a guest in my own home. Then I heard it, her laugh, coming from the next room. "Ryan, look, it's already got over 50,000 views." My son's voice followed, light and proud. "That's crazy, babe. You're going viral." They were laughing together at me, the same son who once swore he'd take care of me for the rest of my life. The boy who, after his father's funeral, promised, "It's you and me, Mom, always." I felt something deep inside me snap, not in rage, but in silence, a kind of cold understanding I'd never felt before. I stood up slowly, leaving the phone on the table. My legs felt heavy, my chest tight, but my face was calm. I walked to the window and stared out at the fading light, watching the sun dip behind the trees. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. An old woman with tired eyes and strong hands, the same hands that had built a home, paid off debts, cooked endless meals, and held that ungrateful girl's newborn when she was too exhausted to get out of bed. And now those same hands trembled, not from weakness, but from realization. I had spent too many years being silent, mistaking kindness for peace. But peace built on disrespect isn't peace. It's surrender. When I turned back toward the table, the phone buzzed again. A new comment had appeared beneath Haley's video. What's she gonna do, post a reply? I smiled. Not the kind of smile that hides tears, but the one that appears when the pain turns into purpose. I realized then that I didn't need to shout or confront or argue. I just needed to let karma stretch her fingers and do what she does best, return energy to where it belongs. That night, I didn't speak to anyone. I cleaned the kitchen again, one last time, quietly, methodically, until every counter gleamed under the light. Then I sat back in that same chair she mocked me for sitting in all day and thought. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt awake. If Haley wanted a show for her followers, I was about to give her one, just not the kind she expected. Because she didn't know it yet, but the woman she turned into a joke was the same woman whose name was on every document in this house. The bills, the deed, the insurance, everything. She didn't just mock me in my home, she mocked the owner of her comfort, the foundation of her easy life. And karma? Karma had just taken her seat beside me, sipping coffee in silence, waiting for her cue. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still quiet, filled with that heavy stillness before dawn. I sat at the edge of my bed and looked at the framed picture on the nightstand. My late husband, smiling, holding our son as a baby. I whispered softly, "You'd be disappointed in how things turned out, love." But as I said it, something inside me shifted. Maybe disappointment wasn't what I should feel. Maybe it was time for action. When I walked into the kitchen, Haley was already there, her phone propped up on the counter. She was applying makeup, talking to her followers, her voice sugary and fake. "Good morning, besties," she said, grinning into the camera. "Guess who has to make breakfast again because some people are just sitting around?" My stomach turned, but my face stayed calm. She turned, pretending to be surprised. "Oh, good morning, Mom," she said with a smirk. "Didn't mean you, of course." The sarcasm dripped from every word. I didn't respond. I simply filled the kettle and set it on the stove. Her laughter filled the room as she ended her live stream. She thought she had won, that her followers adored her, that she'd turned me into a character in her comedy act. But what she didn't realize was that every view, every share, every cruel comment she invited into her life was a seed being planted. And seeds, no matter what kind, always grow into something. For the next week, I said nothing. I went about my routine as if the video didn't exist. I folded clothes, watered plants, baked pies, and took Liam to the park. But I watched. I noticed how she carried her phone like a trophy now, constantly checking notifications, replying to strangers, letting their validation feed her ego. My son, Ryan, seemed proud of her. "She's building a brand, Mom," he said one evening as I served dinner. "You don't get it. This is how people make money these days." I nodded. "Oh, I see," I said softly. "By humiliating their family?" He frowned. "It's just content, Mom. You're taking it too seriously." But I wasn't taking it seriously. I was taking it personally. That night, when they went to bed, I sat in the living room, scrolling through Haley's TikTok account. The video that started it all had reached over 3 million views. Strangers had made duets mocking me, using my image without my consent. But something else caught my eye. Haley had started getting sponsorship offers. Small brands, yes, but real money. I could see the excitement in her captions. "Never thought my honesty would open doors," she wrote. My jaw tightened. Honesty? No, this wasn't honesty. This was cruelty, served with a smile and filtered lighting. I opened my laptop and began typing. Years of working as a community coordinator before retirement had taught me a few things about communication, policy, and reputation. I started by reporting the video for harassment. Then I drafted an email to the brands that had started associating with her. I wasn't malicious, I was factual. I attached a screenshot of her mocking an elderly woman, explaining that this woman was her own mother-in-law, filmed without her consent, and that such content violated both decency and platform guidelines. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. I knew the truth had its own way of traveling. By the next morning, 2 sponsorships had quietly disappeared from her profile. She was furious. "These stupid brands," she snapped at Ryan, "they backed out without even explaining why." I hid my smile behind my teacup. Ryan shrugged, distracted. He was too busy with work to care about her online frustrations. But I could see the cracks forming. Her perfect online world wasn't as stable as she thought. Later that day, she filmed another video, this one more aggressive. "People can't stand seeing others succeed," she said, her voice tight. "They try to drag you down, but I won't stop creating." Her eyes flickered toward me for just a second. I could tell she suspected something, but she couldn't prove it, and that was the beauty of silent karma. It doesn't knock on your door. It simply rearranges your world until you're forced to notice. A few evenings later, Liam came running into my room, clutching his iPad. "Grandma, look," he said innocently. "Mom's on YouTube, too." I froze. "What do you mean?" He showed me her new vlog channel, Life with Haley. There it was again. The same pattern. She'd uploaded a new video titled, "Living with My Lazy Mother-in-Law, The Struggle is Real." I felt my heart twist. Not because she said it again, but because she was dragging the family into something much bigger. Public humiliation was now her content strategy. That night, after everyone slept, I sat in the living room again. Only this time, I wasn't just reporting videos. I started collecting receipts, screenshots, dates, audio clips of her insults. I built a quiet archive, not out of pettiness, but protection, because I knew where this road led. The more she sought fame, the closer she would get to exposing herself. And when that day came, I wanted to make sure there was no misunderstanding about who the real villain was. Days turned into weeks. Haley's fame continued to grow, but so did her arrogance. She stopped helping around the house completely, claiming she was too busy creating content. She started buying expensive clothes with the little sponsorship money she still had, and talking about moving out soon, as if she could afford it. My son began to notice her attitude change. One night, I overheard them arguing. "You don't spend time with Liam anymore," Ryan said. "I'm doing this for him," she snapped. "Do you think I want to work a 9 to 5? I'm building something real." "For who?" he asked quietly. "For your followers or for your family?" That silence between them said everything. I sat by my window, knitting in the dim light, pretending not to hear. But inside, I was calm. Karma was doing her work. Slowly, invisibly. Because soon, Haley's followers were going to learn that behind her ring light and curated smile was a woman who built her empire by mocking an old woman's dignity. And when they did, no filter would be bright enough to save her.
It started subtly. Like cracks in glass, you don't notice until the light hits them just right. The first crack appeared one ordinary Tuesday afternoon when Haley posted a new video, a skit about lazy in-laws. She expected the usual laughter and support. Instead, the comments began to shift. "Wait, isn't this the same Mill from your old video?" one user wrote. "This feels kinda mean," another added. Within hours, her comment section became divided. Some defended her, but others accused her of bullying. For the first time, she didn't know how to control the narrative. Her confident smirk faltered on camera. I watched quietly from the kitchen table, stirring my tea, as the universe began whispering justice into motion. Haley's followers started digging through her past videos. Someone found the old clip where I was visible from behind, cleaning the kitchen in my yellow floral apron. She filmed her meal without consent, a user pointed out. That's not honesty, that's cruelty. The video resurfaced on other accounts. Commentary channels, reaction videos, people debating morality and family respect. My image, once the butt of her joke, became a symbol for something else entirely. The quiet dignity of a generation mocked by the loudness of the next. She panicked. I could tell by the way she kept refreshing her phone, pacing the living room, muttering to herself. "They're twisting everything," she snapped at Ryan. "These people don't get it." Ryan frowned. "Maybe they do," he said softly. "Maybe you went too far." Her eyes filled with frustration. "I was just joking," she said. "Was Mom laughing?" he asked. His question landed heavier than any argument could. She didn't answer. She just stormed off to her room, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I sat there, silent, not triumphant, just still. I didn't need to celebrate. The truth was celebrating for me. Days passed, and the storm online grew worse. Sponsorship she had bragged about in her stories quietly removed their tags. A few even issued public apologies for unintentional association with disrespectful content. Haley's once glowing image began to dim. Her follower count slowed, her smile in videos looked tighter, her eyes darting nervously between sentences. The internet she had used to humiliate me was now turning its lens back on her, and it was merciless. One evening, while preparing dinner, I heard Ryan's voice in the next room. "Haley, my boss saw your video. He asked me if everything's okay at home. Do you know how embarrassing that is?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean for this to happen. It's all gotten out of control." "You filmed my mother," he said. "You mocked her. What did you expect?" There was silence, the kind that weighs more than words. I could hear her breathing, trembling. For the first time, I thought I heard shame. Faint, but real. Later that night, I found her sitting alone on the porch, her phone turned off beside her. The air smelled of rain, the kind that lingers before it falls. She looked up as I stepped outside. "I didn't think it would get this bad," she whispered. "People are calling me a monster." I took a deep breath, the kind that carried years of restraint. "The internet isn't cruel, Haley," I said gently. "It just shows people who they are when they think no one's watching." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was trying to be funny." I nodded. "You forgot that real people aren't punchlines." Then I turned and walked back inside. Sometimes the hardest lesson comes not from anger, but from silence. The next few days were hard for her. Brands blocked her, collaborations vanished. Strangers posted reaction videos analyzing her behavior. She tried to upload an apology, tearful, shaky, overly rehearsed, but it only made things worse. Too little too late. She's only sorry because she got caught. She deleted it within hours. But the internet doesn't forget. It never does. Meanwhile, I continued living as I always had. I took Liam to school, tended to my garden, baked on Sundays. I didn't change my routine, but something about how the world looked at me did. Neighbors smiled a little more warmly. A few even said, "Mrs. Carter, I saw that video. You handled it with grace." I didn't need their validation, but it felt like a quiet vindication. Ryan started spending more time with me too. Maybe guilt, maybe love, but he began to notice the things he had ignored before. "You've done so much for us," he said one evening while helping me wash dishes. I smiled faintly. "That's what mothers do, dear.
until someone reminds them they don't have to. As for Haley, her pride began unraveling faster than her follower count. One morning, she stormed into the kitchen, her voice trembling. They posted a video of me trying. A stranger edited it and put sad music behind it. Her eyes were red, sleepless. I looked up from my tea. Sometimes, when we put pain into the world, it circles back, and it hurts more when we're the ones who feel it. She didn't respond. She just stared at me, not with anger this time, but confusion, like she was seeing me for the first time. That evening, she stayed off her phone entirely. She played with Liam in the living room, laughing for real, not for the camera. For a brief moment, the house felt peaceful again. I almost believed that maybe this was the start of her redemption. But karma wasn't finished. It was patient. It had one last chapter to write. And I could sense it coming, not with fear, but with the same stillness I had felt the day I closed that app. The storm she started had finally turned its eye back on her. But this time, she wouldn't just lose followers. She was about to lose something much more valuable. Something no apology video could fix. Because when you trade real love for digital approval, the day always comes when the screen goes dark. The morning it all truly fell apart started like any other, with the smell of burnt toast and Haley's restless footsteps echoing through the kitchen. She had barely slept. Her eyes were puffy, her lips trembling from the weight of endless scrolling. I could tell she had stayed up reading comments, desperate to find at least one person defending her. But the tide had turned. The same crowd that once cheered her honesty was now dissecting her cruelty frame by frame. She muttered something under her breath, slamming the cabinet door. Ryan walked in a moment later, looking exhausted. "Haley, you need to stop reading those comments," he said softly. "You're only making it worse." Her voice cracked. "They hate me, Ryan. Everyone hates me. I was just making jokes." He rubbed his face. "They weren't jokes to Mom." Her silence stretched like a wound that refused to close. I sat at the table, folding napkins, pretending to focus on my task, though every word settled deep inside me. I wasn't gloating. I was observing. Life was doing what I could never have done myself. It was teaching her that the same audience that crowns you one day will crucify you the next. Around noon, Haley's phone buzzed nonstop. Notifications, messages, calls, until one ring froze her completely. It was from a brand representative she had been working with for weeks. I could hear every word. "Haley, we're terminating our collaboration effective immediately. We can't be associated with your recent content. It goes against our values." Her face drained of color. "Please, this is a misunderstanding," she pleaded. "It was just a family joke." But the call ended. She dropped her phone onto the counter and covered her face with her hands. Ryan reached out, but she pulled away. "Don't touch me. You think this is funny, don't you? You think I deserve it?" He sighed. "No, Haley, but maybe you need to feel it. You can't just post people's lives without thinking of the consequences." Her eyes flickered toward me. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I met her gaze calmly. "No, dear, but I am relieved that truth still means something." That afternoon, Ryan left for work and Liam was at school. The house felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Haley sat by the window for hours, scrolling, deleting, blocking people, trying to clean her digital mess. I busied myself with small chores, polishing silverware, watering plants, baking bread. But every now and then, I glanced at her. She looked smaller than usual. The bright, defiant energy she once carried had dimmed into quiet fear. Then the second wave hit. Someone online had discovered her job, a small local boutique where she worked part-time. They started leaving bad reviews, tagging her employer, sharing screenshots. Within a day, she was called in by her manager. I drove her there myself because she was too shaken to drive. She came out 20 minutes later, pale and trembling. "They let me go," she whispered. "They said my online presence is bad for their reputation." I wanted to feel sorry for her. I really did. But part of me knew this was necessary. Life doesn't always punish with pain. Sometimes it punishes with perspective. For days, she barely left her room. Ryan tried to talk to her, but she avoided everyone. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Then one night, I heard muffled crying coming from her room. I stood outside the door, hesitating. Then gently, I knocked. "Haley?" I said softly. "Can I come in?" She sniffled. "It's open." When I stepped inside, she was sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes of old makeup and camera equipment. Her ring light lay toppled over like a broken halo. She said, staring at her laptop screen, "I deleted everything. All my videos, all my followers. Gone." I sat down beside her. "That's a good start," I said quietly. Her voice cracked. "I don't even know who I am without it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see the arrogant influencer. I saw a young woman drowning in her own reflection. I whispered, "Maybe that's the lesson. When you stop performing for everyone else, you finally meet yourself." We sat there in silence for a long time. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. I could almost feel the years between us shrink. 2 women, 2 generations, both hurt in different ways by the same need to be seen. The next morning, she joined me in the kitchen. Her hair was messy, her face bare, her eyes swollen but clear. She asked, "Can I help with breakfast?" It took me a second to process it. For months, she hadn't offered. "Of course," I said, handing her the whisk. We cooked together in silence. Eggs, pancakes, coffee. Nothing special, but it felt sacred in its simplicity. When Ryan came downstairs, he looked surprised. "You're cooking together?" He laughed softly, tension breaking for the first time in weeks. For a while, I thought maybe this was the end, that karma had done its job and left behind a quiet peace. But I was wrong. The universe wasn't finished yet, because sometimes, when you hurt others, it doesn't just echo through your own life. It trickles into the lives of those around you. A week later, Haley's father fell ill. She wanted to visit him, but her reputation had spread even beyond social media. Old acquaintances whispered, relatives voided her calls. She told me once, through tears, "I used to think fame made you powerful, but now I realize it just makes you fragile." And I thought then, maybe that's the real karma. Not losing followers, not losing money, but losing the illusion that cruelty is ever harmless. It had been 3 weeks since the storm began to fade. The house was quieter now, not because anyone asked for silence, but because everyone had run out of things to say. Haley spent most of her time helping around the house, sweeping, cooking, even planting a few flowers by the porch. She didn't record any of it, didn't post updates, didn't seek applause. The ring light that once stood proudly in the living room now gathered dust in the corner, unplugged. It was strange, almost poetic, how still the world had become after all that noise. One morning, I found her sitting in the backyard with a notebook. She was writing something, slowly, thoughtfully. I approached quietly. "Writing again?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Not for the internet this time," she said. "Just for me." I nodded. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. After all, growth doesn't always start with grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with a blank page and a broken heart learning to heal. Later that day, we were in the kitchen baking muffins. Liam sat on the counter licking chocolate from a spoon. "Grandma," he said, "Mom said she was mean to you. Is that true?" His innocent question caught both of us off guard. Haley froze, the bowl in her hands trembling slightly. I smiled softly at him. "Your mom made a mistake," I said gently, "but she's learning from it." Haley's eyes filled with tears. I was, she whispered. I really was. After he ran off to play, Haley looked at me and finally said the words I'd waited so long to hear. I'm sorry, she breathed. Not the kind of sorry people say when they get caught. I mean it. I was selfish. I wanted attention so badly that I forgot about respect, about decency, about you. I placed my hand on hers. You forgot about love, I said softly. But you can remember it again. That's the thing about love. It doesn't vanish when we fail. It just waits for us to find it again. She began crying, not the loud kind, but the quiet, trembling tears that come when pride finally dies. For months, I had imagined this moment, how it would feel to hear her apologize. But now that it had come, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt human. She wasn't my enemy anymore. She was just a young woman who had lost herself in a world that thrives on applause. And I, too, had once been young and foolish, though in different ways. That night, I made dinner for the family. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and her favorite cornbread. When she sat down at the table, I noticed she hesitated before taking the first bite. Are you really not mad anymore? She asked. I smiled. I was never mad, just disappointed. But that's the thing about disappointment. It fades when you start doing better. She nodded, tears welling up again. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me. I almost did, I admitted, but something told me you'd find your way. Life has a way of humbling us just before it rebuilds us. Over the next few weeks, she started volunteering at a community center. It began as something small, helping organize donations, folding clothes, serving food. But soon, she was staying longer, helping elderly women learn how to use phones, showing them how to video call their families. One day, she brought me with her. Mom, she said, this is Clara. She's 73 and she just learned how to use Facebook. The woman grinned. Your daughter-in-law's a good teacher, she said. So patient. I looked at Haley and she looked back, smiling in that quiet way that said more than words ever could. Slowly, her life began to fill with new meaning, not the kind that comes from followers or likes, but from connection, from being useful, from being kind. She even started a small group for women who had faced online bullying. They met every Friday in the church basement, sharing their stories, helping one another heal. She told me once, it's strange. I used to chase validation from strangers, but now I feel seen by people who don't even have social media. Ryan noticed the change too. You're different now, he told her one evening. I had to lose everything to see what really matters, she said quietly. He took her hand. You didn't lose everything, he said, glancing towards me. You just almost did. But the real turning point came one afternoon when I received a letter in the mail. It was from the same platform where her videos had gone viral. They were launching a campaign on digital empathy, and they wanted me to speak about my experience as the victim of online shaming. I was stunned. I hadn't sought this, but the idea lingered in my mind all day. When Haley found the letter on the table, she read it carefully, then looked at me. You should do it, she said softly. I raised my eyebrow. You think so? She nodded. If anyone can remind people to be kind, it's you. And maybe it's a way for me to make things right, too. I agreed. That night, I stood in front of a small audience at the local library, my hands trembling slightly as I spoke. Sometimes the loudest voices online drown out the quietest truths, but silence doesn't mean weakness. Kindness doesn't mean submission. Every mother, grandmother, wife, or daughter deserves respect, whether she's trending or not. Haley sat in the front row, her eyes glistening with tears. When I finished, she stood up and clapped, the first one to do so. The rest of the room followed. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not for myself, but for her, for finally understanding that the strongest kind of redemption isn't found in apologies, but in change. That night, as we drove home under the soft glow of streetlights, she said quietly, "You know, Mom, karma didn't destroy me. It saved me." I smiled. That's how karma works. It doesn't come to punish, it comes to teach. And for the first time since the video that broke me, I felt peace, not the kind that comes from justice, but the kind that comes from healing. Autumn had just begun to paint the trees gold when I realized how much had changed. The air carried a faint chill, the kind that made you wrap yourself in old sweaters and memories. Life had finally settled into a quiet rhythm again. Morning tea on the porch, laughter from the kitchen, the scent of Haley's new recipes filling the air. But beneath that calm, there was something deeper, something tender, a sense of healing that only time and truth can bring. Haley had started working with a local foundation that helped elderly women who'd been abandoned or mistreated by their families. At first, I thought it was her way of making peace with the universe, a sort of penance. But soon, I saw it was more than that. It was genuine compassion. One day, she came home in tears after visiting an older woman whose children had left her in a nursing home. "She looked just like you," Haley whispered, her voice shaking, and she said she wished her kids would visit, even just once. I reached out and took her hand. "Maybe that's why you met her," I said softly, "so you'd understand what words can do when they cut too deep." That night, she sat by my bedside. "Mom," she said quietly, "I used to think you were lucky. You had the freedom to rest, to relax, to stay home. I never realized you'd already spent your life serving others before you ever sat down." Her words pierced through me like sunlight through old curtains, soft, warm, and honest. I smiled faintly. "We all serve in different seasons, dear. Some of us in youth, others in age. What matters is the love behind the service." Haley nodded, her eyes full of remorse and admiration. "I hope someday I can serve like that too." For the first time, I believed she truly meant it. She had stopped seeking applause and started seeking purpose. The internet, which had once been her stage, now became her silence. She didn't delete her social media accounts, she transformed them. Her new videos weren't about aesthetics or complaints. They were about kindness, empathy, small acts that made big differences. "This is my new series," she told me, shyly. "It's called The Kind Minute. Just 1 minute a day of something good." To my surprise, people responded. Her followers, those same strangers who once cheered for her cruelty, were now touched by her honesty. She spoke openly about her mistakes, about the pain she caused, about the lessons she learned. "I said horrible things about someone I love," she admitted in one of her videos. "But that woman forgave me before I ever deserved it. This is for her." The video went viral not for its drama, but for its truth. Thousands of comments flooded in. People shared their own stories, their own regrets, their own reconciliations. And for once, the internet became something beautiful. Ryan watched the transformation in awe. One evening, he turned to me and said, "I don't know what changed her more, losing her followers or almost losing you." I smiled. Sometimes it takes both. But life, as it always does, had one more test waiting for us. A few months later, I fell ill. It started as fatigue, then dizziness, then nights of breathlessness that left me clinging to the edge of my bed. Haley was the first to notice. "You're not okay," she said one morning, her voice trembling. "You need to see a doctor." At the hospital, the doctor's words were quiet but heavy. Early-stage heart failure. Manageable with care, but serious nonetheless. Haley broke down in tears. No, this can't be happening. Not after everything." I reached for her hand. "Don't cry," I said gently. "Maybe this is just another lesson for both of us." From that day on, she became my shadow. She monitored my medications, cooked heart-healthy meals, walked with me every evening, even when it rained. The same woman who once mocked me for resting now insisted I take it easy. "Let me handle it," she'd say, taking the broom or the groceries from my hands. "You've done enough." It was strange watching her care for me with such tenderness. Each small act was like a quiet apology. Each smile a promise to never forget what she'd learned. Months later, I recovered enough to return to my garden. I stood among the roses, weak but happy, when Haley came outside carrying a cup of tea. "Mom," she said softly, "remember the video where I called you lazy?" I chuckled. "Unfortunately." She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking, maybe I should make another video, but this time telling the truth." I raised an eyebrow. "The truth?" "Yes," she said steadily, "that I was wrong. That you're the strongest woman I know. That I wouldn't be the person I am now without your grace." The video she posted that day was unlike any she had ever made. No music, no fancy editing, just her sitting beside me in the garden, holding my hand. "This is my mother-in-law," she said to the camera. "The woman I once hurt with my words. I called her lazy. I said things I'll regret for the rest of my life. But that woman forgave me before I ever deserved it." Within hours, the video went viral again, but this time for all the right reasons. Comments poured in. "This brought me to tears. You're brave for owning your mistakes. This gives me hope for my own family." As we sat together reading the messages, I felt a strange peace wash over me. Karma indeed had done its work, but not as punishment. It had taken something broken and turned it into something whole. Haley leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "You saved me." I smiled, brushing her hair gently. "No, dear," I said softly. "You saved yourself. Karma just showed you the mirror." That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something profound. Sometimes, karma doesn't strike with thunder. It arrives softly, disguised as love, healing what anger once destroyed. And that, I thought, was the real miracle of our story.
It's strange how life changes its rhythm when forgiveness finally settles in. The house that once echoed with tension now hummed with laughter and peace. There was no more sharpness in Haley's tone, no coldness in Ryan's silence. Mornings became sacred again. Haley would brew my favorite cinnamon coffee, the same scent that once filled the air the day everything broke. I'd sit in my old navy blue armchair, the one that still held its color like time itself had respected it, and watch her prepare breakfast while humming softly to herself. There was healing in those small sounds, the kind that only comes after storms. One day, as she set my cup down beside me, she said, "You know, Mom, I used to think I had everything figured out, that I knew what success and happiness meant. But it turns out I didn't even know what love looked like until you showed me." Her eyes glistened with sincerity, and for a moment, I saw the young woman she must have been before pride and comparison hardened her heart. "Maybe love," I said, smiling gently, "isn't about grand gestures or perfect pictures. It's in the quiet acts, the meals, the care, the forgiveness we offer, even when it hurts." She nodded, sitting beside me on the couch. "Do you ever regret forgiving me so easily?" she asked. I laughed softly. "Forgiveness isn't easy, Haley. It's just lighter than carrying resentment. One day you'll understand. It's not about forgetting the pain. It's about choosing peace over poison." Her eyes filled with tears again. "You could have thrown me out, humiliated me online, or told everyone what I did. And what would that change?" I said, taking her hand. "Then there'd be two cruel people instead of one. Karma doesn't need an assistant, dear. It just needs time." That phrase, "karma doesn't need an assistant," became somewhat of a family motto afterward. Haley even printed it on a small frame that now sat above the mantelpiece. Every visitor who came noticed it, and she'd smile sheepishly and say, "That's my mother-in-law's wisdom. It saved me."
Over time, something remarkable happened. Haley's new content, The Kind Minute, caught the attention of a television network. They wanted to feature her in a documentary about digital redemption, how social media, often a place of cruelty, could also become a tool for healing. She came to me before signing the contract. She said, "I don't want to do it without your blessing. It's your story, too." I smiled and shook my head. "No, dear, it's our story. Just promise me one thing. Tell it honestly." When the documentary aired months later, it opened with that same viral clip, the one that once humiliated me. But this time, it wasn't the focus. It was just the beginning of a journey. The camera shifted to a new scene, Haley and me in the garden, planting flowers together. She narrated softly, "I once called this woman lazy, useless. I thought her silence meant weakness, but her silence was strength. Her patience was love, and her forgiveness was the moment karma turned to grace." The world watched, and once again, the internet reacted. But now the comments were different. This made me call my mom. I finally apologized to my grandmother. This healed something in me. Haley cried reading those words. "Mom," she said, clutching my hand, "people are changing because of you." "No," I said quietly, "because of truth. Truth always changes hearts. It just takes courage to speak it." Ryan, who had once joined in Haley's laughter at my expense, became the most protective son you could imagine. "You'll never lift a finger again," he insisted one morning as he fixed the fence in the yard. "You've done your time." He looked up at me, his expression full of guilt and love. "I still can't believe I laughed that day, Mom. I can't forgive myself for that." "You already did," I said, "by changing." That evening, we sat together at dinner, the same table where I once served them silently, my heart breaking behind every polite smile. But this time, Haley insisted on cooking everything. The aroma of roasted vegetables and her famous apple pie filled the house. "Dinner's ready," she called out, the same voice that once mocked me, now softened with love. As we ate, she raised her glass. "To Mom," she said, her eyes glistening, "for teaching us what real family means." I couldn't hold back my tears. I didn't need applause or acknowledgement. Just that moment, surrounded by the warmth of reconciliation, was enough. Later that night, as I sat alone on the porch under the golden moonlight, I thought about how far we had come, from being the butt of an online joke to becoming the heart of a story that healed strangers. That's the thing about karma. It doesn't always punish. Sometimes it teaches. It doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it rebuilds. I remembered that old video, how she had mocked me, laughed, said, "That old woman just sits on her A all day." And now here we were, side by side, sharing the same peace I once thought I'd never find again. Maybe karma wasn't about revenge after all. Maybe it was the universe's way of restoring balance, of showing that love, even when tested, can still bloom again. Before going inside, I whispered into the night, "Thank you, karma. Not for making her suffer, but for making her see. Not for breaking us apart, but for stitching us closer than ever before. Because sometimes life's cruelest moments are just love wearing its toughest disguise." Time has a way of softening even the sharpest memories. Seasons passed quietly after that dinner, and the house began to feel alive again, not because of noise or movement, but because peace had finally moved back in. I'd often wake up to the sound of birds at the kitchen window, the same ones I used to feed when loneliness was my only companion. But now the chirping blended with Haley's laughter, with Ryan's deep morning voice, with the clatter of little feet running through the hallway. Yes, the house was alive again. Haley and Ryan had a daughter that year. They named her Grace. When they told me, I couldn't stop the tears from falling. "We chose that name," Haley said, her voice trembling, "because of what you gave us. Grace when we didn't deserve it." I reached out and held that tiny hand, her fingers curling instinctively around mine. And in that instant, I felt the circle of life complete itself. The pain, the betrayal, the lesson, and the love. It had all led here, to the small, perfect soul sleeping in my arms. Haley often asked me to tell stories about the past. "Tell me how you met Dad again," she'd say while feeding the baby, her eyes sparkling like a child's. I'd smile and begin, "Your father wasn't much of a talker, but he had the kindest eyes." And just like that, the years would melt away. We'd sit together for hours, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, and every memory filled like another stitch, mending the fabric of what was once torn. Ryan, too, had changed in ways I never imagined. He was more attentive, more patient. On weekends, he'd insist we all go to the park together. Family day, he'd call it. And while Grace slept in her stroller, he'd walk beside me, quietly pushing the swings for other children. "You were right, Mom," he said once, watching Haley play with the baby. "Love isn't about taking care of someone when it's convenient. It's about showing up when it's hard." I smiled softly. "Looks like you finally learned what your father always knew." Ryan nodded. "I wish he were here to see this." "He is," I whispered. "Just not the way we expect." It's funny how a house remembers. Sometimes when I'd pass by the old navy blue armchair or smell cinnamon from the kitchen, it felt like the walls themselves sighed with relief. The echoes of the past no longer hurt. They hummed like old songs, familiar and warm. I realized that healing doesn't erase the scars, it just teaches you to see beauty in them. Haley had kept her promise about the documentary. It became a small hit online, shared across platforms as "The Woman Who Forgave." But what made me proud wasn't the attention. It was what she did with it. She started a small charity called The Grace Project, offering digital literacy classes for elderly women. "So they never have to be humiliated online like you did," she said. Every week I joined her, teaching the ladies how to use their phones, how to set privacy settings, how to connect with family without fear. Watching their faces light up reminded me that even pain can plant seeds of purpose. One afternoon, a young journalist came to interview us. "Do you believe in karma?" she asked, adjusting her recorder. I smiled. "I do, but not the kind people fear. Karma isn't a punishment. It's a teacher. It brings you back to balance, even if it hurts along the way." She nodded thoughtfully. "And what lesson did karma teach you?" I said, "Sometimes the ones who hurt you the most are the ones who help you grow the most." Haley's eyes filled with tears as she listened. She hugged me tightly later. "You always speak like you're writing poetry," she said. I laughed. "That's because pain has a rhythm, dear. Once you survive it, you learn to dance to it." As the years went by, Grace grew into a bright, curious child. She loved to follow me around the garden, picking dandelions and asking questions about everything. "Grandma," she said once, "why do you take care of the flowers every day?" I smiled, "Because they remind me that beauty comes back, even after it's been cut down." She tilted her head, thinking deeply. "Like people?" "Exactly," I said, pulling her into my arms. "Like people." Sometimes when the evenings were quiet, Haley would come sit beside me on the porch, watching the sun melt into gold. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked once, referring to the day she made the video. I nodded slowly. "Every now and then, but not with pain anymore, just gratitude." "Gratitude?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," I said, "because if that moment hadn't happened, you and I wouldn't be here like this. Sometimes life needs to break before it becomes whole." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're too kind, Mom." "No," I whispered. "I just learned the hard way that kindness is stronger than anger. It leaves a longer echo." That night, as I tucked Grace into bed and kissed her forehead, she looked up at me sleepily. "Grandma," she mumbled, "Mom says you're my hero." I smiled. "Oh, I'm just an old woman who sat down one day and learned to get back up." Her small hand held mine tightly before she drifted off to sleep. And in that silence, I felt the universe smiling too. Karma had done its work, not with fire, not with fury, but with quiet grace. As I turned off the lights, I looked around my home. The same walls that once held humiliation now glowed with love. The house that karma entered as a witness had become its masterpiece. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from silence, but from understanding, and that's the kind I had now. My mornings were slower, my steps softer, but my heart felt younger than ever. The bitterness that once sat heavy in my chest had turned into something else, a calm acceptance, a deep gratitude for the way life had unfolded, however imperfectly. Sometimes I'd sit by the window, a warm blanket over my knees, watching Grace draw pictures on the floor, her little hands covered in crayon dust. The world had changed so much, and yet, in moments like that, I realized the essentials never did: love, respect, and second chances. Haley often joined me there, her laptop open beside her as she edited videos or answered messages for the Grace Project. Her presence no longer carried that restless energy she once had when chasing likes and views. Now she worked quietly, content in her purpose. People from all over are joining the classes, she told me one day, excitement twinkling in her eyes. There's even a woman in Italy who said she finally reconnected with her mother because of what we teach. She turned to me and smiled. Can you believe that, Mom? Your story helped a woman halfway across the world. I chuckled softly. I didn't do much. I just lived long enough to see what love can fix. Some afternoons, we'd revisit the old videos, the good ones, the ones that carried lessons instead of pain. Haley would laugh at her younger self, shaking her head. I can't believe I was that person. Don't be too hard on her, I'd say. She was lost, not bad. Haley smiled faintly. You always see the best in people. Not always, I said, sipping my tea, but I've learned to look for it. There was a time when I thought growing old meant fading away, but now I understood that age was just another chapter, a chance to see your story come full circle. I'd see my reflection in the mirror sometimes, the wrinkles deeper, the hair thinner, but I didn't flinch anymore. Each line had meaning. Each scar had a memory behind it. I no longer saw an old woman who sits all day. I saw a survivor, a builder, a mother, a teacher. One evening, as the golden hour poured through the window, Grace climbed into my lap with her picture book. Grandma, she pointed at an illustration of a woman with silver hair and a gentle smile. That's you, right? I laughed. Maybe it is. She looks like someone who knows everything, she said thoughtfully. I shook my head. No, sweetheart, she just learned from everything. Grace tilted her head, considering that. Then I want to learn like you. Her innocence made my chest tighten in that bittersweet way only love can. I realized then that every generation carries the echoes of the one before it. The mistakes, the lessons, the redemption. What we do, even in our quietest moments, ripples forward in ways we may never see. As night fell, I walked out to the garden. The roses were blooming again, the same ones I had almost neglected when my heart was heavy years ago. The petals glowed under the soft light, and the scent carried a memory. The day I first saw that cruel video, and the day I decided not to let it define me. Standing there now, it felt like I was watching life apologize in the language of flowers. Haley joined me after a while, wrapping a shawl around my shoulders. You always come out here at sunset, she said. It's my favorite time. The sky looks like forgiveness, all the colors blending without fighting for space. She smiled at that. You always know how to say things that stay with me. Maybe that's what old age is for, to leave words behind that outlive you. She fell quiet then, looking at the horizon. You know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I used to think karma was cruel, but now I think it's just fair. I nodded. It's the universe's way of teaching us how to be human. A breeze rustled the leaves, and for a moment I thought I heard Richard's voice in it. Calm, reassuring, like the old days when he'd tell me everything would be all right. I smiled into the wind. He would have loved this peace, this family we rebuilt from ashes. Maybe in some unseen way, he was still here, smiling with me. That night, as I prepared for bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror again. I didn't see the woman from that cruel video. I didn't see the victim of mockery or the target of online laughter. I saw Ruth, a woman who had faced humiliation and turned it into harmony. I touched the glass lightly, whispering, "We did it, didn't we?" Just before turning off the lights, I looked at my phone, the same phone that had once shown me the worst day of my life. The screen lit up with a new video notification from Haley's channel. The title read, "The Woman Who Taught Me What Karma Really Means." I pressed play. It was a short clip, just Haley standing in the garden, the wind brushing her hair, her voice soft but steady. She taught me that karma isn't about revenge, it's about reflection, about learning, healing, and becoming someone better than your past self. So if you've ever hurt someone, apologize. If you've ever been hurt, forgive. Because love isn't weak, it's the strongest thing you can be. The video ended with her hugging me, a still image captured from a few weeks ago. I didn't even know she'd filmed it. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from something pure, fulfillment. And as I lay in bed that night, I realized that karma's final act wasn't about making her pay, it was about making her change. And in changing her, it had changed me too. A few weeks later, the world saw a different video. One that told a new story. This time, it wasn't Haley chasing trends or clout. It was a documentary-style piece, quiet but powerful, titled, "What My Mother-in-Law Taught Me About Grace." I didn't even know she had been working on it until it went viral overnight. The opening scene showed the same dining table where years ago I'd been humiliated by her laughter, but now it was dressed in flowers and candles, a picture of love restored. As the camera panned, her voice narrated softly, trembling with honesty. "I once said things I can never take back. I thought being modern meant being louder, sharper, funnier, even at the cost of kindness. But I was wrong. The woman I hurt most is the woman who showed me what love really looks like." I watched it from my living room, my hands trembling as the video played. Each clip was like watching time reverse. Haley sitting beside me while we baked cookies for Grace's birthday. The two of us gardening, laughing as the hose water splashed everywhere. There were no filters, no background music, just raw, living moments. At one point, the screen cut to a shot of me sitting in the garden, humming an old song. I remembered that day. She had asked me if she could film me for a project. I had no idea it would end up here. My voice came through, fragile but steady. People see karma comes to punish. I think it comes to teach. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, it whispers forgiveness instead of revenge. That line became the video's heart. I didn't know until later that it had been shared by thousands, reshared by parenting pages, therapy groups, and even news outlets, calling it the most healing video of the year. The comment section was flooded, some from mothers, others from daughters-in-law, and even from men who admitted they saw their own mistakes reflected in Haley's story. "I judged my mother-in-law too quickly," one wrote. "I'm calling her tonight." Another said, "I showed this to my mom. We cried together." It was surreal. For years, I had felt invisible, erased by age, mocked for moving slowly or speaking gently. And now suddenly, my story, our story, had become a mirror for thousands. Not as a tale of revenge, but of redemption. Haley came running to me that evening, her eyes glistening with tears and joy. "Mom, we did it! Look, 500,000 views in a day!" She laughed through her tears. "People are saying they've never seen anything so real online." I smiled faintly. Real doesn't need a filter, darling. It just needs courage. She hugged me tightly, like she had the day she first apologized. But this time, it wasn't out of guilt. It was gratitude. pure, trembling gratitude. That weekend, Grace helped us make cookies for a small thank you video. The three of us wore aprons, flour on our cheeks, laughter in our voices. It felt like reclaiming something stolen years ago. Not just dignity, but family. A few days later, a package arrived in the mail. It was from a community center in another city. An invitation. They wanted us to visit and speak about healing generational relationships. I looked at Haley, surprised. "You think we can do that?" She smiled. "You've been doing it your whole life, Mom. I'm just tagging along." When we arrived at the event, I was nervous. Public speaking had never been my thing. But when I walked onto the stage and saw the faces, mothers and daughters sitting together, hands intertwined, something in me steadied. I told them my truth. About the day I heard my DIL insult me online, about the tears, the silence, the forgiveness, the choice to stay kind when bitterness would have been easier. And as I spoke, I realized something profound. My pain had turned into purpose. The humiliation that once burned me had become the very light guiding others out of their own. At the end of the event, Haley stood beside me and took the microphone. Her voice shook, but her words flowed like she'd been waiting her whole life to say them. "I thought I knew everything. I thought my phone could teach me the world. But this woman taught me what no screen ever could: humility, love, and grace. She didn't fight me when I disrespected her. She didn't expose me when I deserved it. She let karma work. And karma worked through kindness." The audience rose to their feet. There were tears, applause, and hugs. A woman my age came up and whispered, "You made me want to call my daughter again." I hugged her back, whispering, "Do it tonight. Don't wait for time to run out." Later, as we drove home under the warm evening sky, Haley reached for my hand. She said softly, "I used to think you were just sitting around doing nothing. Now I know you were holding the family together without anyone noticing." I smiled at her words, my heart full. "Sometimes doing nothing is how we do everything," I replied. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the strange beauty of life, how something cruel and humiliating could turn into something healing, how karma didn't destroy, but repaired. I realized that the same world that once laughed at me was now listening to me, not because I shouted, but because I waited. And maybe that's the greatest karma of all, when the noise that mocked you becomes the echo of your wisdom.
The months that followed were quiet, but they felt full of meaning, warmth, and something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The video Haley made eventually surpassed 1 million views. Strangers from around the world sent letters, handwritten notes, and even knitted scarves, saying they were inspired by our story. But for me, the real miracle wasn't in the numbers. It was in the mornings, the simple, ordinary ones that felt new again. The smell of coffee, the sound of Grace's laughter before school, the soft, "Good morning, Mom," from Haley as she stepped into the kitchen. These were the moments that healed the cracks I thought would never mend. One day, as we sat on the porch, Haley brought out a photo album she had been working on. It was titled "Before and After Forgiveness." Each page told a story. The first few were old photos: me with Richard on our wedding day, Ethan as a baby, then as a young boy holding a toy truck, then one of me in my apron, laughing while flour dusted my face. "You've always been the heart of this home," Haley said softly as she turned the pages. I could see tears shimmering in her eyes. I just didn't see it before. I reached for her hand. "Sometimes love hides behind silence," I told her. "We don't always need to shout to be heard. Sometimes we just need to wait for the echo." She nodded, her grip tightening around my fingers. "I used to think being loud made me strong, but you showed me that quiet can be power too." As we flipped through the final pages, I noticed something that made my heart swell. There were photos of Haley volunteering at the community center with Grace, teaching children how to paint, bake, and even plant flowers. She had turned the lessons she learned into something living, something giving. I wanted Grace to grow up knowing what respect looks like, and what better way than to show her what you showed me. In that moment, I realized that karma had done more than balance a wrong. It had transformed a soul. It had taken the bitterness that once poisoned our home and turned it into something beautiful, something fertile. Like rain washing over cracked earth, it had revived love where it had died. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Grace came running to me with her school assignment, a project titled The Person I Admire Most. She had drawn a picture of me sitting on my armchair, surrounded by plants and books. Underneath, in her little handwriting, she'd written, "My grandma doesn't just sit all day. She listens, she teaches, she loves. And that's the hardest job of all." I couldn't stop my tears. I pulled her close, kissing her hair, whispering, "You have no idea how proud you make me." She giggled, wrapping her tiny arms around my neck. "I love you, Grandma. You're my best friend." Later that night, I sat by the window, watching the moonlight fall across the garden. The same garden I once tended alone, watering it while tears burned behind my eyes after watching that cruel video. Now it glowed with new life. Daisies, roses, marigolds, each bloom felt like a memory reborn, proof that even the deepest pain could grow into something beautiful if given enough time and care. Haley joined me with 2 cups of tea. "Do you ever regret not fighting back?" she asked quietly. I thought for a long moment before answering. "No," I said finally, "because if I had fought her way, we both would have lost. But by waiting, by letting karma do its work, we both learned something that no fight could ever teach: grace." She smiled, her eyes wet. "You're stronger than anyone I know." I chuckled softly. "No, darling, I'm just old enough to know that strength isn't about shouting. It's about staying kind when no one else is." The wind rustled the curtains, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden. It reminded me of Richard, of how he used to say, "Life has a way of coming full circle, Rufy. Just keep your heart open." I finally understood what he meant. In the end, karma didn't come to punish. It came to restore balance. It didn't destroy Haley, it rebuilt her. It didn't make me bitter, it made me whole again. And in that balance, our family found a new rhythm, one that pulsed with respect, gratitude, and quiet love. The next morning, I woke up early and sat in my old navy blue armchair, the one that had been with me through everything. I brewed my coffee, the familiar aroma filling the air. I opened my phone, the same way I had the day I saw that cruel TikTok years ago. But this time, my notifications were filled with love. Messages like, "Thank you for reminding us what patience looks like," and "Your story changed my relationship with my mother-in-law." I smiled. Life had truly come full circle. The same platform that once broke my heart had now become a vessel of healing, not just for me, but for so many others. And as I took a slow sip of my coffee, the morning light spilling across the floor, I whispered to myself, maybe sitting all day isn't such a bad thing after all, if you're sitting in peace.
Years passed, as they always do, not in grand events, but in the soft rhythm of everyday moments. The house that once echoed with tension was now filled with laughter, music, and the gentle hum of family life. Grace had grown into a bright young woman, full of dreams and kindness, the living proof that love, once broken, can heal stronger than before. Haley, too, had changed. Her loudness had softened into warmth, her pride into humility. Sometimes I caught her watching me in quiet admiration, as if still learning lessons she never expected to find in an old woman's silence. By then, I had grown slower. My steps carried the weight of time, but not of regret. Every wrinkle on my hands felt like a story, every scar like a badge of endurance. I'd spend mornings in my armchair, sipping coffee and watching the garden bloom. The same flowers that once heard my silent prayers now seemed to whisper back to me, "You did it. You waited, and you won." One morning, Grace came home from school with her hair tied up in a bun, her cheeks glowing with excitement. "Grandma," she said, "they're making a movie about you." I laughed softly, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't. A small production company had reached out to Haley after seeing our viral video years ago. They wanted to tell our story, the story of how an ordinary act of cruelty became an extraordinary lesson in forgiveness. Haley was hesitant at first, worried about exposing our pain again, but I told her, if our story can stop even one person from repeating our mistake, then it's worth telling. Filming began a few months later. I didn't appear much, just a few small interviews, sitting in my armchair with my teacup, telling bits of my truth. The actress who played me was kind and gentle, but I remember thinking, no one can really act what silence feels like. When the movie premiered online, it became something much bigger than any of us expected. It wasn't about fame or forgiveness anymore. It was about empathy, the kind that crosses generations. People began to share their own stories under the hashtag, "But Karma had other plans." Women from all over the world wrote things like, "This made me call my mother again," or "I finally understood my MIL's silence." For me, it wasn't the fame that mattered. It was the change, the quiet shift in hearts, the way people started to see elders, not as burdens, but as living libraries of love and wisdom. A year later, I found myself sitting in the community garden Haley helped build, the Grace Bloom Center. Children played in the distance, their laughter mixing with the rustle of leaves. Haley was teaching them how to plant marigolds, and Grace was sketching me from under a tree. "Stay still, Grandma," she giggled. "I want to get your smile right." I stayed still, but inside I was trembling, not from weakness, but from overwhelming gratitude. Life had come full circle again. The same hands that once trembled holding a phone filled with cruel comments were now steady, surrounded by love, purpose, and peace. As the sun began to set, I closed my eyes and thought about Richard, my husband, my anchor, my quiet strength. I could almost hear his voice in the wind. "You see, Ruthie, time doesn't always heal everything, but love, patience, and faith, they do." I smiled, whispering softly, "You were right, Richard. You always were." The next morning, Haley and Grace found me asleep in my chair, the sunlight kissing my face, the garden outside in full bloom. My coffee sat beside me, half finished, still warm. I didn't wake up that day, at least not in the way they expected, but I left this world with a smile, surrounded by the peace I had fought for, silently, patiently, lovingly. At my funeral, Haley stood before the crowd, friends, neighbors, people from the community center, even strangers who'd been touched by our story. Her voice shook, but it carried strength. She taught me that revenge doesn't always come in noise or fury. Sometimes karma wears a gentle face. Sometimes it teaches instead of destroys. And that's exactly what she did. She taught, she healed, and she forgave. Grace came up next, holding a small daisy she had picked from the garden. "Grandma said flowers grow best after storms," she said softly. "So I'll keep planting so she can keep blooming, even in heaven." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Haley played the old TikTok clip that started it all, the one where she had mocked me. Then she paused it halfway, her voice breaking as she said, "This was my worst moment, but because of her, it became the moment that changed my life." Then she played the second video, the one titled, "What My Mother-in-Law Taught Me About Grace." The hall filled with my voice, my words echoing one last time, People say karma comes to punish. I think it comes to teach. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, it whispers forgiveness instead of revenge. As the final frame faded, Haley looked up and whispered, "Rest well, Mom. Karma finished its work, and so did you." Afterward, the garden outside the hall became a memorial, a place where people left flowers and notes for their own mothers and grandmothers. The sign at the entrance read, "The Ruthie May Garden, where karma turns pain into peace." And maybe that's how karma really works. Not by destroying what hurt us, but by transforming it, turning hate into humility, ignorance into understanding, and silence into something eternal. Years later, Grace would tell her own daughter the story. "Once upon a time, someone called my grandma lazy online, but karma had other plans." And the little girl would giggle, asking what plans? Grace would smile and answer, "To make her the strongest woman in heaven." And somewhere beyond time and screens, I'd be smiling too, watching, knowing that love always wins in the end, because that's the truest karma of all.